Hello and welcome to Conversations with the CEO. I'm your host, Leigh Toney, Executive Director of the Carrie Meek Entrepreneurial Education Center at Miami-Dade College. Excited to have with me today a longtime friend, Fabiola Fleuranvil, who's the CEO of Blueprint Creative Group here in Miami. Welcome, Fabiola.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on the show, finally.
Yes.
Good. So, Fabiola, you're certainly at the center of a lot of what's happening in the entrepreneurial space and marketing activities in Miami-Dade. So we're going to have a pretty broad conversation. I'm going to talk to you about your company, but I also want to pick your brain about the pace and support for entrepreneurs in Miami-Dade right now, which I think is at a pace I've never seen in 15, 20 years. So let's start there. What do you think about entrepreneurship in Miami-Dade County and all the focus on entrepreneurship and growing entrepreneurship in this community? Have you ever seen anything like it, and what does it feel like to be an entrepreneur operating in this space right now?
Well, I mean, considering the fact that we're a small business community, largely a small business community, it's definitely encouraging to see the pace be elevated at a much higher level than I would say maybe 10 years ago. And so the conversation is also evolving, not just around entrepreneurship, but also around tech, but also other segments. So I'm seeing things in creative, fashion entrepreneurship, other aspects of it. So I think it's really good. It's definitely helping with this talent need that we have, is bringing in people here, is turning new eyes to here when we talk about the different conferences that's in Miami. So new people from outside of Miami are looking at Miami in a different way, and it's elevating our brand to be much more than just this party or beach city. It's really adding depth to who we are as a community. So I think it's really good to see how entrepreneurship is really driving all of that.
So you're a young professional, and at one point in Miami, the conversation was about the brain drain and how the talent that we're creating is going in and benefiting other communities around the country. And so there's a lot of talk now about talent retention and keeping people in Miami. It's all of this activity and this new focus on showing Miami as a growth market, and there's a lot of interesting things happening. Is that attracting young people to stay or young people to come into our community?
Well, I think what's key in what you said is really showing Miami as a growth market, and I think that's what's really been driving this new growth. Miami is not difficult to attract people. You know, we have what a lot of other communities don't have, but it's how do you keep them here while they're here? But the important thing that we don't really discuss much when we're talking about brain drain is also the net impact of it. So for as many people as we can say that leave Miami, how many more people actually come in and move into Miami and contribute to our diverse ecosystem? And so I think when we look at it in that perspective, it may not look as bad as we probably thought it had been. But entrepreneurship is really driving a lot of that. And then there are also other factors that's really driving this talent migration. When we look at other communities and why people are leaving, you know, people are leaving the Northeast. I was just reading an article that more people are starting to leave the Northeast. They want a slower pace of life. Obviously the weather is adding to that, so people are moving now towards the South. And when you think about the cities in the South, Miami is at the top of where you could actually move. And so when we blend entrepreneurship, when we blend this growth ecosystem that's happening, and then the diversity of Miami, it really helps us to look much more appealing to people who could move and live and contribute to here.
So let's look at your own story as an example of that. You're a native Miamian?
Yes, native.
So
born and
you
raised.
left here, went to school at?
Florida A&M in Tallahassee for undergrad, and then also Clark Atlanta for grad school.
Oh, really? I'm at Clark Atlanta for grad school. I didn't know that about you.
I don't know if I knew that. Okay.
Yeah, good. Well, and that means you went to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Most people go to Atlanta and stay.
Right.
You came back.
Well, I came back for a few reasons. Well, for one, I went to Atlanta because I wanted to be in the hub of entrepreneurship. So being at FAMU's School of Business and Industry, and when you talk about the ecosystem that's already being built there, so I knew that I wanted to be in a nurturing environment that could start to develop me for that while I was in grad school. So Atlanta was top of mind for me. And again, that plays into this brand and perception that you have of Atlanta. And so being in Atlanta, being there in grad school, pursuing the MBA, and just seeing how Atlanta moves and how they have this culture of entrepreneurship, of innovation, it really helped to elevate me in what I wanted to do entrepreneurially. And so I did that, you know, just coming out of grad school, that's where I went into business. And I ended up staying in Atlanta for a total of 5 years. But then while I was in Atlanta, I would always look at Miami and just compare the two. So I'm like, Miami is wide open in this space. Atlanta does this, they're not doing this in Miami. Or there's so much more opportunity in Miami, because I always saw Atlanta as cluttered. Everybody's moving to Atlanta. That's like the hub of the South. And so I didn't want to be in a space to where there was no room for growth, or where you're competing with 20 other people just like you. So I saw Miami as that growth market for me to go in and just kind of carve out a niche. And so Miami did make it a little easier to be able to do that.
So did you come here working for a company, or did you start your own venture right away?
Well, what I did, my company was already established in Atlanta. I just rebranded it. So my focus in Atlanta, just because of who Atlanta is, was more so on the entertainment side. So I was directing marketing and PR for record labels and fashion brands in the entertainment industry. And so when I moved to Miami, just because at that point I didn't really see that space in Miami the way that I had already networked in Atlanta, I just rebranded it to have more of a corporate focus. And so I changed the name, actually, legally changed the name to Blueprint Creative Group, and it's been that way since 2008.
You shared a story with me. I asked you, had you ever worked in corporate America, and you said
never.
Never.
Now, I had jobs in college, all marketing focused, so that's why I always knew that I wanted to go into marketing, but never had a real job outside of grad school.
So tell us about that. You figured that out, that you wanted to work for yourself.
Well, I was always an entrepreneur, so even in the 7th grade, I had already figured out how to make money. So I was selling chips and candy, and so it just happened accidentally when my mom bought like one of those leftover Halloween bags. Instead of eating it, I took it to school and sold it. And so she was like, oh, okay. So she kept feeding that and was just buying more bags. Well, if that's what you want to do, go ahead. And so in the 7th and 8th grade, I was making $50 to $100 a week just selling chips and candy. And even in college at Florida A&M, I was doing my own entrepreneurial things while I had a job, a part-time job. But I always knew that I was an entrepreneur. So that was already something that was embedded within my spirit, you know, on the leadership side. And so when I went into grad school, I knew that I wanted to go into marketing consulting. Not sure how, but that was from an internship that I had while I was in undergrad. And so just being in grad school, obviously with a school like Clark Atlanta University, having the recruiters that we have, there is a lot of pressure for you to go into corporate America. And so I had some pretty strong brands and organizations that I interviewed with, multinational companies. And so I remember going into interviews, going into first, second, and third rounds and sitting there and thinking to myself, I really don't want this job. And so there was one interview in particular where I was flown out to Dallas, where it had a pretty hefty signing bonus. And so, and I'm there like, I really don't want this job, even though it's very attractive and it could really just propel my career instantly, but it didn't feel good for me to do that.
That's a bold move, and that's a really interesting point to go into our first break, but don't worry, we're going to pick back when we come back, because there's a lot wrapped up into being able to recognize that and then being able to act on it and move in a way that's unpredictable.
Right.
So let's pick that up. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and talk more with Fabiola, Blueprint Creative Group, so please stay with us.
Be creative. Be a hero. Be the solution. Be connected. Be innovative. Be global. Be successful. Be you. Be MDC. Be Miami-Dade College.
Welcome back to Conversations With. I'm your host, Leigh Toney, and my guest today is Fabiola Fleuranvil, CEO of Blueprint Creative Group. And right before we went to break, you were sharing a really interesting anecdote about interviewing with companies while you were in graduate school at Clark Atlanta and having a real nice, sizable signing bonus right within your grasp, but knowing in your spirit that taking that job wasn't going to be the right thing for you. That's really bold, very courageous, and very self-aware. And so I want to, because a lot of our students watch this show, I want to just peel back the onion on that a little bit and talk about what you were experiencing and how you found the courage to make a different decision.
Well, I knew what I loved. So I've always loved business. And from the time that I was in high school, I was in national NBLA, won district with that. So I always knew and loved business, always loved marketing. And I discovered that in undergrad from the part-time jobs that I had and the internship that I had during undergrad. So I came into grad school with that purpose because I wanted to have an advanced level of that understanding. But I also knew that I was not a good employee. And I have to be careful in saying that because it's so easy for people to say,
to misinterpret.
Right. I'm not going to be somebody's employee. But I am not a good employee just because of the way that I work. I may have my best inspirations at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, just the way that I work and the way that I lead and the way that I receive feedback and the way that I direct. I'm just not a good employee. And so I had a good internship in grad school, and that really drove that home for me. The people around me were lovely. They loved me, wanted to be around me, but that corporate atmosphere, it was just not for me. Having to do the lunches and the dinners and, you know, having to really be absorbed in that corporate culture was just not me. It just felt fake and not authentic to who I was. So I just knew that I could not just fake my way through corporate America, even if it would look good for me. And so the hardest part of that is convincing everybody else around you, especially when you're going to a private school and you know it's not cheap and everyone's expecting you to come out and do something with that degree that you just put in those 2 years in. And so that was the hard part. But after interviewing back to back with companies, having multiple rounds, and me just not finding the job that I was looking for. So I don't know if I would have found that perfect opportunity, if that would have changed my mind, but I didn't know what that perfect opportunity looked like. So I just figured, you know, I would just create my own job. And so we graduated. Everyone's bragging about who they're going to work for, where they're moving to, and me, I'm like, I'm doing my own thing. And so, you know, you're looking at your parents and having to convince them of that. But I was always that child to where I had strong convictions. So once I had already said that I would do something, there's nobody that could change my mind. Not because I'm stubborn, but just because I was already convinced internally that that's what I'm going to do. So my parents knew that there was no way that they can convince me. They might look at me crazy, but, you know, they just went along with it. So,
did you have money to start up with?
No. But I'm a hustler, so I know how to make money. I can find a way to make money. And so, no, I didn't have money to start up with. So, but how I did start up, I mean, I was also real with myself. I've never had a real business. In grad school, I started an online women's shoe company. So, and that was before Facebook, and MySpace was just emerging, right. And that was before Zappos. So I had to learn myself those technologies at a time when tech wasn't really sexy and e-commerce wasn't really the thing to talk about. So learning how to develop my own website. I was a grad student. I didn't have money to pay somebody to design my own website. So I had to teach myself. At that time, it was Dreamweaver. Yes. You know, yes. So no WordPress. You know, no templates to work from. So I had to really teach myself how to design and then how to market it. You know, where would my sales come from? You know, I did trade shows. And so I had already had my first taste of a real business because it was registered. I had a EIN, had to pay taxes and submit the sales and use receipt. So that was my first taste of it. But when I came out of grad school, I realized that in what I wanted to do, I needed some more foundation to that. So I interned, and I interned for free. I interned within the space that I wanted to work in. At that time, though, when I interned, my game plan was to really network my way through and build up my own portfolio at the same time. And so within 2 or 3 months of that internship, I had my own set of clients, not competing against who I was interning with, but just through me networking in Atlanta. And that was the benefit of being in Atlanta at that time because it was such an intimate circle of entrepreneurship, to where, you know, you can feed off of that energy, and that alone would just catapult you to where you needed to go. And so I quit that internship, and that's when I launched my business in 2006, and just took it from there.
Good, good. So what was that like? Did you have a team that started up with you? Were you doing all of it powered by Fabiola? How did you get out of the gate?
Well, I did work alone, but I also partnered with someone else on very specific projects where I knew that I didn't have certain strengths. And so I'm wise enough to realize where I'm not that good and where someone else is better. So I know how to just pull in other people and say, hey, can you partner or work with me on this? And so, but for the most part, it was just a one-woman show. But to my clients, they could care less because the work was still at that level to where it was still producing. And so that was between that 2006, 2008 time frame where I was working in the music and entertainment industry. That was when Napster was starting to change the game. And so that was also a point where I had to pivot because it messed up the record labels, record stores that I relied on, DJs that I relied on were now starting to change and try to figure out how to stay in business. And so that affected me as well. If the record stores are having to pivot and decide how to stay in business, I need to figure out what's this Napster thing, what's this digital downloading thing. And so at that point, I don't think anybody was really prepared to learn these new music technologies. And so that was also the same time that I was starting to transition back to Miami. It took me an entire year before I actually moved back, but I would go back and forth. And so when I did finally land in Miami permanently, I decided to just change pace, pivot, and rebrand the organization under a new name and different set of clients.
You provide a really good segue. So we're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Blueprint Creative Group and the move to Miami and really delve into the whole ecosystem for entrepreneurship, and particularly for entrepreneurs of color too as well. So look forward to that conversation. Hope you'll stay with us. We'll be back with Fabiola shortly.
Be creative. Be a hero. Be the solution. Be connected. Be innovative. Be global. Be successful. Be you. Be MDC. Be Miami-Dade College.
Welcome back to Conversations with the CEO. I'm Leigh Toney, and my guest today is Fabiola Fleuranvil from the Blueprint Creative Group. So right before we went to break, you were talking about your transition to Miami and how you'd been in the marketing business and entertainment in Atlanta. Now you fast forward, we're talking Blueprint Creative in Miami. So totally different ecosystem, different environment. What's happening at Blueprint Creative today?
Well, Blueprint Creative Group started as a marketing agency, and I know that's a mouthful just because people don't really understand what exactly is marketing. They just know from what they see in ads and radio ads that that's what marketing, but it's evolved since then. And so from that point of transitioning from the corporate sector to now becoming this agency that is all about really building movements, messaging, driving action through experiences. So we're doing a lot of brand activations. I've done a lot of activations with different multinational brands, but also have a specialized unit now with HBCU branding where the focus is specifically working within the HBCU space, historically Black college and university, with either organizations and brands who want to tap into the Black millennial or the HBCU lifestyle, but also working directly with the universities on very specific campaigns. And most recently, I've started to also stretch into the tourism marketing space over the past year and a half. And so that's probably the biggest growth area right now and the biggest area for opportunity right now in the tourism space.
So how have you seen the entrepreneurship landscape change for the better for entrepreneurs in Miami?
Well, when I came in, I didn't really hear this buzz about entrepreneurship here. So it's easy to feel alone, especially as a woman, to find other female entrepreneurs that can share the same thoughts and ideas and that you can bounce off. Because we have pains as entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. I don't care how well you're doing, you still have pains. There's been a couple of moments where I'm like, if I had a job, I could probably go to sleep by 11 o'clock at night. So, but since that time in 2008 until now, there's a lot more entrepreneurs that I can connect with. There could always be more, particularly in the Black community, but there's a lot more entrepreneurs that I can connect with. And so it helps to be in that space. I thrived in Atlanta because it was a very intimate circle of entrepreneurs. So in those days where you're tired, you can bounce off of their energy. So it does help to be in that ecosystem.
What is the impact of efforts like Endeavor and Emerge on entrepreneurs who are in the daily grind like yourself?
Yeah, well, Endeavor and Emerging, as well as Black Tech Week, it helps with the story. So Miami has this potential, but that potential doesn't mean anything if the story does not connect with people from outside of this community. So it all helps to feed into that story that we actually do work here. We don't party and play and lay on the beach all day long, but that there are people that are innovative and doing some great things here. So it's helped to put us on that national and even maybe a global map as well.
What are you most excited about as you look at your company, you think about the next 5 years, say for instance? What are the trends that are emerging, or what's keeping you optimistic about the climate for business in this area?
Well, in this area, it helps as we continue to grow and diversify the types of businesses that we have here. In my space in marketing, you either have the big sharks or you have those who are trying to compete with those. So as we move the bottom up, it kind of closing that gap and makes the competitive space a lot easier to navigate and network in. So at least in my industry, that's what I could say. But just in general, I think that if we ever have to fall into a space where the economy dips the way it did just a few years back, we always know that entrepreneurs can always find a way or make one, and that'll keep things going. So I think it's a good economic story just in general.
I think the Clark Atlanta University grads heard that, find
Came
a way
out.
to make one,
Yeah.
sneak in there. Tell me about the diversity of Miami. I mean, we're the gateway to Latin America. We have a thriving and rich Caribbean population. How does an entrepreneur, particularly like yourself in marketing, take advantage of that, all of that diversity and all of those resources and opportunity?
I think the diversity is what works for us, but I don't think we use it to its fullest potential. Ideally, I would like to see the communities blend. And so that way, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're not talking about the heartbeat of Miami's entrepreneurship ecosystem just being in Wynwood or being in Brickell. The North Dade area has it's based off of entrepreneurship. When you talk about the Caribbean community, they're entrepreneurs. They came here off the backs of entrepreneurship. So it'd be good to see, all sectors of our community really blend. When we're talking about building up this ecosystem, that's when we know that the equity and how entrepreneurship is growing and shaping Miami would have that shared prosperity for all the communities.
So you were entrepreneurial from your earliest days. Much of our audience is college students who are much like yourself, native Miamians. Many of them come either from southern parts of the country or Northeast or from the Caribbean. What would you say to them if they have an idea that they've been percolating? Should they wait, get the degree, or is there support and an environment that would say, do it now?
I would definitely not tell anyone to wait and get the degree. Get the degree because you need that and people do respect you for it. But had I known that now, I would have used my college years as my testing ground. So there are a lot of opportunities just while you're in college to really tap into your professors, tap into the resources that's on campus, but also tap into the other students as well. So I would really use that as my testing ground and just say, do it now. If you have an idea, it's probably going to take you a couple of different rounds of that idea before you can actually perfect it and bring it to market anyway. So do it while you can fail fast, fail quick, and fail cheap.
Yeah, I like that. Fail fast, fail quick, fail cheap. You're very diverse. You have a company, you're considered among the new thought leaders in our community, and you also write in events column. So how did you weave all of that in?
Well,
is that why you don't go to bed till 3:30?
Actually, yes. Actually, I'm not sure how writing came about. I mean, what people don't know about me, I have a background in real estate as well. So on the sales side and the investment side, that's what I was doing in Atlanta along with having my company. So I'm an entrepreneur, so I just seize opportunities where I see it. But where the writing came in from, just being involved in the community and just authoring thought pieces in the Herald and other publications, I just got pulled because there was a gap that they needed to fill and say, hey, we want to hire you just to do that thing. And so I'm like, I don't write, but I'm a communications person, so I can write, I think. And so it just came from that. So that actually allowed me to tap into an undiscovered talent that I had not nurtured before.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to make the hashtag for this show Seize Opportunity. Hashtag Seize Opportunity. I like that. Fabiola, we should meet and talk more often. Thank you for being on Conversations With. I knew I liked you. Now I know why even more. So I hope you enjoyed a conversation with Fabiola today. Conversations With. I hope you'll come back and stay tuned and be a regular viewer on Conversations with the CEO. Thank you very much.